Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of my Kitchen Table Talks, where I invite fellow authors, interesting people, sometimes strangers who I have no idea who they are or why they're here, onto the show. Luckily, today I do know this person. We've been Facebook friends for a little while now, and I'm so pleased that you are on the show. I have Amy Blackthorn on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Welcome, welcome. So I'm going to be disrespectful here, Amy. I'm actually drinking coffee right now. So
Oh,
although you
lovely.
create tea, we are going to talk about your tea later on, but I'm not drinking tea. So I'm not, I'm hoping you're not going to judge me for it.
This is a dress. These are not judgy pants.
So, for those people who may be outside of North America or who have not come across your work before, I'm pretty sure most people listening to this have, because you're in the same circles as many of the listeners, I'm sure. But for those who don't know, who may not know who you are, Amy Blackthorn is the award-winning author of the bestsellers Blackthorn's Botanical Magic, Sacred Smoke, Blackthorn's Botanical Brews, Blackthorn's Protection Magic, and Blackthorn's Botanical Wellness. She has also been described as an arcane horticulturist for her lifelong work with magical plants and teaching. She incorporates her experiences in British traditional witchcraft with her horticultural studies. She has a certification in aromatherapy and is ordained through the Order of the Golden Griffin. Amy's company, Blackthorn's Botanicals, creates tea based on magical associations. She has appeared on HuffPo Live, Netflix's Top 10 Secrets and Mysteries in an episode about supernatural abilities, and the AP Newswire. Amy lives in Delaware, and you can view Amy's tea shop and all of her other offerings at blackthornsbotanicals.com. For those who are watching the YouTube channel, of course, that is just underneath Amy, just on the screen here. And for those in listening on Spotify, it'll be in in the down below bit. You know what I'm saying. You people who are listening know what I'm saying. So welcome, Amy.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. No, thank you for coming on. And also thank you for coming on so short notice too, because I think we
Oh, of
just
course.
organized this about 2 weeks ago. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. I'm taking some minutes. I just, turned in two manuscripts and I needed a break.
Well, I feel that. I feel that. A human contact too, right?
Yes. Oh my goodness, yes. People think, it's so glamorous to write. I just sit in my office and yell at the walls until a book falls out.
I love it. I love it. I've started on several manuscripts myself, and nowhere near ready to be even like shown to anybody yet. But that whole process of like, oh my God, I feel it. Yeah. But now I mean, you started publishing 5 years ago. You have such an abundance of work behind your name now. So let's start with that. What's it been like for the past 5 years?
Five bestsellers in 4 years is mind-boggling. I'm glad that I took 2023 off from publishing because I was writing two manuscripts while I was publishing two manuscripts and querying and doing all those sorts of things for oh my goodness, watching them come out. It's really funny because the first when I was writing Blackthorn's Botanical Magic, I was actually I think the first edit in and I was writing and sort of finagling the words and it hits me out of the out of the blue that this would outlive me that
Mm,
the words I was cementing into the ether right now would exist after I was dust. And so it was really blew my mind that not only are people going to see this, once I release it out into the wild, people that I've never met will have thoughts and feelings and experiences with my work that I've
mm,
never met. And it's really incredible to think about the things that we say impacting other people's lives who will never meet and will never know.
yeah.
It's really lovely when someone comes up to you at a conference and says, "Oh my God, your book changed my life," and it's so humbling. And the number of people who will never get to say that to you is far greater.
Mm,
My very
mhm.
first uh, fan letter came from a woman in Tibet. Like, what?
What?
What are you talking about? Just a minute after it had been released, after Blackthorn's
Mm,
Botanical Magic had been released, and she was emailing me to apologize. She emailed my author page on Facebook to apologize for only having purchased Blackthorn's Botanical Magic as a digital book download rather
mm.
than as a physical book because owning the physical book could get her killed.
I can imagine. Mhm.
Like you just like it knocked the wind right out of me.
Mm.
It's a massive responsibility. And I had thought about it, but it had never had any context before.
Mm, mm.
And until someone shows it to you, there again, we only understand our own experiences really. We can think of how we'll feel if someone approaches us with a philosophical question, but when someone says they're risking their life to hear what you have to say, there aren't words anymore.
What can you say to that? That's the thing, right? Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
That is just a massive responsibility, and there's nothing to say but thank you.
I'm not even sure how to like what question can follow that up, to be honest. That's incredible.
That's why we're having a conversation. It's all good.
Well, it's interesting. What I've had so far, and I mean, my own book only came out like what 4 months ago, right? It's
Mhm.
been very, very limited so far. But the podcast has been going on a lot longer, and I know you
Right.
also run a podcast too. And the
Yes.
feedback I've got from that has been really like every so often I'll get I really appreciate, the questions that you ask, or I really appreciate this one guest you had on. And, I really got something from what they were saying in that conversation you had, like that's gold to me. And I really
Yes.
appreciate that. For your own podcast, you started it before you were published or
No, no,
afterwards?
I started after I was published, but before the pandemic.
Mm,
So I was doing that new year, trying to find my goals and sort of figure out what I was doing. And my publisher, Wiser, was like, "We love you. Please, please have a blog. Please have other ways for people to get to know you."
mm,
But I really found I had a blog for a million years, Realm
mm,
of the Green Witch. It's still up and it still exists, but the creative outlet that I needed was that blog. I started writing that after I did like an Ask Phoebe advice column for witches in a magazine called Thorn Magazine a million years
oh, yeah.
ago. Um, and I missed that creative outlet of writing those things. So it was magazine, and then it was the blog, and then it was this. But the energy that it took for me to write a blog post, the creativity that it took, that was it. If I wrote a blog post, I wasn't writing the book that I was being paid for.
Right.
So the idea of having the podcast gave me the outlet of talking about these things really,
Mm,
and it wasn't putting that information and that energy into being creative with my fingers. I was
mm,
able to talk about it, and my brain separates that into two different pieces. So
mm,
it wasn't taking away the creative vibe that I needed to write. It was really feeding it by giving it a different
mm.
outlet. So I'm just starting season 5.
That's so exciting. That's so exciting. I mean, I had Devin on last season. We talked about his podcast, and he's been podcasting for about 10 years now. I think
Mhm.
10 years, 15, 10
Yeah,
years. Um,
just for,
forever. Like he's been around forever. So for you, what was the biggest takeaway while you were writing? You said it was feeding your creativity.
right.
What were some of the key moments for you in podcasting that really fed that creativity?
It was understanding that the outlet that I had, meeting friends at conferences and talking about our books, at the lounge outside of the conference, in the lounge at midnight, we could have those moments all year round. And I didn't have to wait for Sacred Space, and I didn't have to wait
Right.
for Mystic South. I didn't have to wait for those individual pieces. We could create that magic here or
Mm,
wherever they are. And I didn't have to wait. And we spend so much time as witches waiting and asking for permission and, holding our breath, waiting until the next new moon, next full moon, next holiday.
mm,
I didn't want to wait anymore.
yeah.
I have been dead. I'm not planning on doing it anytime soon. I really look forward to being able to create those magical moments with people that I really care about.
Mm. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. I one of the kind of the downsides for me has been having wonderful conversations with people and then getting into like having a really good flow and then not knowing how to translate that into the virtual space, right? Not knowing how to casually be like, oh, hey, because we're all busy. We're all, all of us, we've got
Absolutely.
stuff going on, right? And so without those conferences to attend or those in-person events to attend, it's kind of like, oh, well, I'm going to have you on my show again just because I want to talk to you, right?
Yeah, I think at this point, Mortellus has been on my podcast 4 times or 5 times. Like, we just want to talk all day.
Oh, Mortellus.
They're just the
I adore
best.
Mortellus. I adore. I'll be honest. So, of course, listeners will know that Mortellus was the first episode of this season. I
Mhm.
was very, very before I sat down with them and we got into it, and I realized what a dry sense of humor they had. I was really intimidated because I was like, "Oh God, Mortellus, their book is amazing. Oh my God!" I don't know what to do. Now I'm like, "Oh, it's Mortellus," you know.
My
So
I
good.
have that lives in my phone. I have a favorite picture of them, and it's they're wearing a hat and glasses and a mustache for they were supposed to be incognito at another event, and it's just the best thing in my that lives in my phone.
I love it. Well, and I mean, this raises the next like major point I wanted to get to with this was that idea of how I mean we have our online personas, we have our author personas, and then we're just people outside of that. And I know you've worked a lot with, or at least we were talking beforehand, you've worked a lot with kind of navigating between those two in your security role. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. It
Hmm.
was actually really a big part of my consideration for a number of years, because having Amy Blackthorn not wear a suit and a tie. Amy Blackthorn is barefoot and like mostly wearing skater dresses because they're comfy. Uh, Security Amy has to wear a rayon suit. Ugh.
Oh, that's
And
what, oh, especially on a
right,
hot day, right?
yes, and they're all hot when you're wearing rayon. Uh, I worked really hard to keep my witchcraft life and my mundane life very severely compartmentalized. Like, we don't breathe near each other. And so it was one of the reasons I love writing protection magic so much because I never thought I could get security Amy and Amy Blackthorn in the same room. But working security, and keeping that clarity and keeping that very sharp line, did cause an interesting problem. Because
Mm-hmm.
when you work with insecurity, we're used to knowing all the tea before anybody else does. So it attracts people who really are interested in understanding the tea before anybody else. So I had a guy who reported to me. I had 20 officers reporting to me. I was the head of security for the most expensive commercial real estate in the state of Delaware. It was two
Oh,
buildings, 35 floors of people's lives were in my hands.
wow.
It's a lot of responsibility, and it's actually could be very scary, um, given that 80% of the world's Fortune 500 companies are incorporated in Delaware.
Mm.
So this gentleman really, it bothered him that I didn't talk about my life outside of work at all.
Mm.
And so he did a little investigating himself and went, "Oh, well, what's Miss Amy doing? Who is she talking to? Where does she go when she's not at work?" And so the next morning I came into work at 5 a.m., grabbing my radio and clocking in, and he says, "So, I hear you're a witch."
Mm. Right, right.
um, he was very proud of himself for learning something that I didn't tell him, very patting
Mm.
himself on the back and smug. And I had to explain to him that gets people killed.
Yeah.
This is not a game. This is not funny. It's not a
Mhm.
joke. You could have killed me just now.
Mm.
Luckily, now it's been 10 years and he's still very ashamed of his behavior. And
I
we're
should
old
say
friends
so.
now. But it never occurred to him because, again, he didn't have that mindset. He'd never been a part of a marginalized community.
Right, right. Not, I mean, and not to mention the whole, counteracting your boundaries and disrespecting you. Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. So what then brought what was the deciding factor for you to bring them both into the room then? I mean, was that the deciding factor or was it an evolution?
It was an evolution, definitely. I
Mm.
went through, so many years of really intense work. My first day at this site, I was still training. I wasn't by myself. I wasn't, I still had my training wheels, and we had a bomb threat and a death threat and a suspicious package in one day. Just my
Wow.
first day of training.
Yeah.
And yeah, the suspicious package was a pressure cooker. It was right after Boston Marathon bombing. And so this was a big deal that
Mm.
this was out in front of our all glass building, where we had two international magazines, two credit card companies, two national insurance agencies,
Mm.
and the two largest law firms in the state in
Mm.
this building. So it could have been for any one of them. There was no note.
Mhm.
Um, but it was really intense. There was a lot of stress that it came with it, and it got to the point where I realized that I couldn't be Amy Blackthorn any percent of the time. I had to be security Amy every minute of the day. 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm putting out fires, and it just got to the point where I'm like, you know what, Amy Blackthorn deserves some air in the room, so let's make sure that happen.
Mm.
And I trained my replacement, and I quit.
Nice.
And the next Monday morning, I woke up, and as a joyfully unemployed person, I go downstairs and I grab my candles and my cauldron and my oils, and I start making something up. I'm going to get rid of my old baggage from work and make room for the next new thing. And I'm
Mm.
carving the candles, and I'm talking to my spirit guides and whoever else, and I'm anointing the candle, and I'm getting ready to light it, and the front doorbell rings. And I think that's the fastest work I've ever done. So I go and I answer the door, and I have to sign for a package, and I come back into the kitchen to my candle and my 14-inch cast iron cauldron of doom, and the whole kitchen smells like lemongrass.
Mm.
And this light bulb goes on over my head. If I had this in a tea, I could do my magic while I do my magic, and I could make this all work together. And so before I
Mm.
even lit the candle, I had Blackthorn's Botanicals was born.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it.
So
I love it.
once I had Blackthorn's Botanicals under my cords, so to speak, I went to see Judica Isles,
Hmm.
who is
Hmm.
my amazing editor, and I would do absolutely anything for her. She's amazing. And she said, "Hey, why aren't you writing for us?" And I'm like, who is us? I don't know who that is. What's up?" And she says, "No, I just started working for Wiser." So she had me give her an elevator pitch for. I gave her a couple different books. She says, "Oh, send me that as a proposal." And a year later, Blackthorn's Botanical Magic was on the shelf.
Wow. That's really a quick. Wow.
Oh yeah, it's
Hmm.
people don't understand how long books take.
No, they
It's not
don't.
just the writing, but it takes a year once we turn in the manuscript,
Yeah.
and we don't really have a scope for that because all we see is coming next year is, you know,
It's the thing, right?
Blackthorn
That's
Botanical
exactly it.
pocketbooks.
Yeah. Especially when you've got writers who are like churning them out because they've been pre-planning all these years, right? They started
Exactly.
like 30 years ago, but like their 15 books are now coming out right now, right?
Exactly. The minute I turned 18, I ran out and I joined the first coven I could find.
Yeah.
Don't never do that. Um, but they really pushed me to teach and to experience and to publish and to, you know, put my ideas out into the world. So I had been working for the last, 15 years to try and make myself someone people would listen to.
Mm-hmm. So what's that like now to be somebody that people listen to?
It's
I hope
terrifying.
I know. Sorry, that came out really weirdly, so I hope that wasn't
No, no, no,
disrespectful,
no,
but
no. It's good. It's neat because I always wanted to have that as not just a job, but as a
Mm.
calling. But I didn't understand how important or the responsibility involved.
Mm.
I was working security and daydreaming about being able to be a witch for life, and
Mhm.
not we put so much information and so much emphasis on the mundane world and the magical world. We only get one. You get one,
Mhm.
love.
Mhm.
One. Um, so once I was able to really put that together and say, you know what, I deserve to be able to live the life that I want.
Right.
When I first started working in security, I was the personal bodyguard to the CFO of a $30 million company. And I felt warm and important, and because this person depended on me. And when it no longer felt like that, it was time to leave. So in security, instead of executive protection, it's a different face. It has a different feel. There's a lot more concierge energy to it.
Mm. Mhm.
Trying to make people's day better, a little easier. We tend to understand less about the responsibility of it because we're, everyone's putting on their polite faces and holding doors for people and making community connections. But it's still really important and can be kind of scary.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, you were saying about some of the experiences off camera, and so I'm curious with that piece around responsibility because
Right.
off camera, we of course, as always, we chat between each other before we start recording. We had a really interesting little mini conversation about that, and something that really struck me was that balancing act between kind of sitting in that security concierge kind of world where you're on 24/7, even if you have a smile on your face and you're opening the door for somebody, but you're still facilitating.
Oh
And it
yeah.
struck me like in kind of ritual work and like chaplaincy work and being kind of, leader and facilitating that role. There seems to be very similar kind of mindsets. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And if I, at 18 years old, if I could have had any one job in our coven, it would have been the man in black,
Ed.
protecting my coven from any outside threats, making sure that, spiritual wise, energy wise, people wise, that would have been like, sign me up.
Yeah,
Yes, please.
yeah, yeah.
Um, I was just a baby, and we had a gentleman who had previously left the group that I was joining, so he left and then I came in, sort of ships passing in the night. And we came to the Covenstead one day, and there was on the door handle of our space was 13 little witches and 13 little nooses hung on the doorknob. Like,
Mm,
yeah, that's not great.
hmm.
I definitely would have been the person to sign up and say, yes, I want to be the person who's, you know, going back and forth between different groups and carrying the news, keeping the identity of members safe and secret. And it definitely still has that same care and attention that security does. And it definitely fulfills both sides of that.
That makes sense. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. In writing then a book all about protection magic and bringing that piece in, now I'm kind of wondering what I don't know how to ask this, so I'm just going to blurt it out and hope it makes sense. What surprised you about what people don't do in their lives? Like, was there anything surprising that people just don't get and that you had to
Oh,
address in the book?
absolutely.
Mm,
I was super duper lucky. Again, Judica was amazing. So I approached the proposal for protection magic just like any other magical book. I put together my proposal and I send it to Judica and say, "This is what I'm thinking." Well, for those of you on the backside who don't know what happens, Judica gets to write a book report about what I sent her, and she sends it, and she proposes it, she illustrates it for something called a pub board. It's different publishing
mhm,
executives within the company, and they get to argue over whether or not they think that book will sell or not. So Judica, knowing me personally and professionally, said, "Hey, this is her proposal. Also, guys, if you didn't know, she's been in executive protection for 15 years and she's got a black belt, and she is a firearms instructor, and she's a domestic violence advocate, and she does all these things outside of her witchcraft life where she can bring that in." So when she
mm,
came back to me and said, "Hey, we'd like to offer you, for Blackthorn's protection magic," and they actually put in the physical self-defense aspect based on Judica's recommendation. I didn't include it because, again, I never thought I'd get Security Amy and Amy Blackthorn in the same room
in
together.
the same room together, right?
So I was over the moon, over the moon. And I definitely went for it. There's in the middle of Blackthorn's protection magic is a 13,000 word escape and evasion course. What to do, what to carry, what to have on you, what to have in your
Mhm.
car, what to do if somebody follows you, what to do if somebody, tries to steal you, all of it,
Mm,
because this is the world that we live in.
mhm.
Um, I live in a blue state and I've been run off the road into oncoming traffic with a dude screaming out his window, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live!"
Yeah,
Like nutso
yeah.
stuff. Um, so it's not enough to just wish that the whole world would give you a hug.
Mhm.
Um, I wish it was.
It would be wonderful, wouldn't it? It would be
Right.
wonderful. Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
said that to my mother one day, and she said, "Well, if they did, what would you take? What would you go for in school then? What would you wouldn't have those classes to take? I
I mean,
could
you could
just be
do
a
it for fun,
horticulturalist forever."
Well, it's interesting because like so I had Kobe Michael on a couple of months ago, and I know you're speaking at you're speaking at the Obscura event, are you?
Not this one. I have in the past.
Not this one. You have in the
Right,
past.
right,
That's
right.
great. Again, all jumble in my mind. You know, it's all timey-wimey stuff, right?
Yes.
But it seems like on the point, like the poison path really speaks to that idea of protection as defense, right? And through offense. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Absolutely. It was really lucky because we wound up next to each other at at an event in October.
Mm,
We were next door neighbors at Witch Lab does an event that is a weekend long shopping
mm,
classes, huge event. And so we were neighbors for that. And we got to talk about our relationships between the plants that we get to understand and how we really expand those experiences beyond just the idea of who they are as a plant into who they are as a person.
right.
Um, the book that I just turned into Wiser is is sort of an exploration on that level of I talked to Judica about it yesterday. I said it's how to win friends and influence plants. She's like, that's amazing, write that down. When we approach plants as beings with agency and understand who they are and what they can bring to our magic and what we can bring to the relationship, that is such a huge difference from the honestly colonialist mindset and colonizer mindset of
Mhm.
using plants in magic.
Yes.
The word use just makes my
Yeah,
skin
I'm not a
crawl.
big fan of it. Hmm.
No, thank you. So actually being able to approach them as empowered beings with their own agency was it a huge not just idea but change in the practice in the way that I could approach magic and friendship.
Mm, hmm. Hmm.
So it's a 80,000 word book on how to do that for yourself. Uh,
I'm excited. I'm excited for it.
Kobe is just a doll, and I would carry him around in my pocket. And it's nice because stuff like Witch Labs event, which I would walk to Ohio if Tiffany asked me to. These events, that's my pit bull Millie. Um, Witch Lab, and especially like Temple Fest with Christopher Penzak
Mhm,
and a lot of other. It was really lovely to have some downtime to relate to other authors as people.
mhm.
We spend so much time at festivals and conferences where, because we're the talent, I hate that. Um, we're
I know.
constantly ships passing in the night. We're waving at our friends as they walk past us on the way to somewhere else, and we don't really get to hang and enjoy each other's company. So it's been really enjoyable to actually get to do that some of that this year.
Mhm. I being up in Canada here and like really connecting entirely actually through online because the
Mhm,
pagan crowd up here, all of the older pagan crowd know the pagan crowd from Starwood because they all grew
right.
up together. But
Mhm.
like the younger crowd don't know each other unless they're going down. And having that border in between is an issue. I feel like quite lonely up here, just saying. But it's just one of those. It's just one of those things of the job, right? Of being a facilitator for all of these crowds of people, and not being able to really just sit down, and just shoot the shit with people, right?
Yeah.
It's an issue. Yeah,
I was talking to my neighbor about it, and she thinks it's glamorous and awesome and amazing that I get to go and do these things. And it's like, darling, this is work. This isn't vacation. This isn't
yeah.
vacation all day. This is, driving 8 hours, setting up, having to be on every minute. There's a lot of actual work involved in it. And it looks cute for
Yeah.
Instagram. It looks like a vacation, but it's a lot of work.
It's a huge amount of work, huge amount of work, and not putting down some of those Instagram witches or those Instagram
Oh no, not at
influencers,
all.
but
Of course not.
no.
Never.
Well, I'm going to. It's one of those things. It's different from setting up a beautiful backdrop and taking pictures versus actually being on with people constantly, every 5 minutes, coming up and talking to you and asking you questions, probably asking the same question just in a different way over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Being present, right? Yeah.
Trying to get a bite to eat and someone comes up to you with spinach in your mouth and they're like, "Oh, can I get a picture?" Like, I'm mid bite.
It's
That's
belladonna. It's belladonna.
it's very interesting. Being an author full time, all day, every day, is not what I thought it was, but I'm so glad that I did this. I
Mm,
get to this is my actual dream job. I want to get out there and experience and talk to people and help people. But
mm,
it's definitely
mhm.
not what I have a lot of author friends before I started publishing. So I thought I knew what it was, and I had no idea.
Yeah. Until you're actually in it, I feel that.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. What was the we could go so many different ways with this conversation, but I'm going to ask you this.
sure, sure.
What was the most not disappointing, what was the most surprising thing after your first book started coming out? What was the disillusion that fell away? What was most surprising for you?
It's interesting. Like I've been to the mall and someone recognizes me at the mall, which
Mm,
is totally outside the realm of reality. I never thought this would happen. Um, but it's so interesting when you're saying you spent so much time and you spend so much energy, and our little job is word choice.
yeah,
You pick just the right word and you try and fit it in there. And it seems that there are days when someone just wants to find something at fault with what you've said
yeah,
rather than read the words that you've chosen, read into it and sort of pick it apart. And it's like I have no control over what someone feels about my work. They've never spoken to me. They don't know me from Adam. Um, but they're going to feel how they feel about my work. I really have nothing to do with it. It's all about how they
mm,
experience my book in the time that they read it, what they were dealing with at the time, and it really
mm.
has nothing to do with me.
It totally has
And
nothing to
so,
do with you. Yeah.
right, that was such a huge shock that I had to take me out of my work. And it's like, but I am my work,
Yeah.
but I'm really
That's the
not.
thing.
It's all about people's perception of what they've dealt with in their time and how that affects them. And the fact that my work wasn't about me was kind of a big deal in my head for a while.
Right, right. In what way? Expand on that. It's a very big question. Expand on that for me.
Thank you, thank you. So when I first talked about working with plants as beings with agency,
Mm,
I had someone get really offended by this. Uh, so the oregano in my spice cabinet, I have to ask it for permission if I can use the stuff in my spice cabinet. Ha ha! Like you're trying really hard to get offended here over something that's
mhm,
not. And so I got to
mm,
talk to them like when you approach a plant that you're growing in your garden, I talk to them, I let them know what's going on. I ask for their consent to use their actual body parts in my ritual. Um it's a very give and take relationship. It's not just, weed whacking down everything in my yard and saying, ha ha, you belong to me now. There's no diabolical machinations. There's no mustache twirling. It's
yeah.
just trying to give everybody some decency,
Mm,
trying to understand and respect. I say people very broadly.
mhm,
Agency.
yeah.
Agency is why I do magic. People are like, oh, well, what is it? It's agency, 100%, 1,000%. That's why I'm here.
Mm,
Bodily autonomy is my entire jam.
mm,
Making sure that people, their personal sovereignty is understood and respected is
mm. Huge.
absolutely.
Hmm. Hmm. So what was the response? How was that taken?
At that point, it was pretty much just blown off. They were able to come back later and say, I was kind of being a jerk, and I appreciate that you took that time, um, but it wasn't about you, and that's really where that came from. That understanding that they were dealing with something personal and it had nothing to do with me, which can be hard. Everybody, everybody has a minute where they're like, okay, why are you taking it out on me? But I understood. We've all got stuff that we're dealing with, and we all have times and places that aren't the best for us, and they may not make us look the best. And
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, especially if you're in the public eye, you have to be on your best behavior every minute of the day, because someone's going to approach you when you're having a bad day and you
Hmm.
can't take it out on them,
Totally. No, you can't.
because that's who you'll be forever in their mind. You couldn't have, stubbed your toe and said a bad word. It's gonna be who you are to them for the rest of their lives.
I think that's really like just let's just underline that piece there because that is part of the pressure. That's part of the kind of the stepping into this role. That's the unintended consequence of all of this. I was speaking to Evo the other day when I was recording the previous episode, which was 2 weeks ago for those who are watching. Um, but it's that moment, like one of the biggest moments for me in really understanding I need to be very careful with what's coming out of my mouth now
Mhm.
every single moment of the day
Yes.
because whoever I'm talking to, unless I can trust that I can just be and vent and, be the less than stellar person that I sometimes am, if I say a wrong thing or if I make a criticism that is unfounded or if I'm just not a good person in that moment, right? It can dash so many things for them.
Yeah.
Right. That's the issue. Yeah. That's a lot of pressure though, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
We talk, the conversation around masking has gotten more public, and I absolutely love it. But
Mhm.
it's absolutely having to put on a show every minute of every day, especially if you're
Yeah.
at a conference. You can't be in your scruffy PJs at 2 in the morning, running to the ice machine.
Yeah.
You know, I'm still Amy Blackthorn at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's so I always like when this topic comes up, mainly
Yeah,
because I'm sitting with a lot of guilt because I over like 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, when I really came into the online pagan world again after a few years away, I
yeah,
was a bit of an asshole. I was I was full of myself. I had an ego because I was in a really unhealed place. And then as I became healed and I started to realize how much anger that I was holding on to, I started to realize how much I was just projecting outwards.
yeah.
And I mean, meeting people who knew me back then and now, know me now, or re-meeting people who I knew back then and so on and so on, some of them authors, right? It's a really humbling experience to know that, some of the nasty things that were coming out of my mouth were some of those projections, but taking ownership of that, but also allowing ourselves grace. And as authors, I think that that's also a big thing too, is allowing ourselves grace to be able to then use as teachable moments. I often use those as teachable moments. I'm wondering for you
Absolutely.
then, like over that process of realizing, the criticism that somebody's putting onto you is their stuff. How do you take care of yourself in those moments when, it gets to you? How do you take care of yourself?
That's very difficult.
I know, I
I I
know, I
have
know.
I have an amazing therapist who I adore. Pam is amazing, and I would be lost without her. Um, but it's really important to make sure that I'm taking time to appreciate who I am outside of my author life. Especially there at least one night at a conference, I'll get together, we'll hang out in my PJs with other author friends who we don't get to see outside of conference life, out of conference land, and you know, have some ice cream and have snacks and just shoot the breeze. Um, that was a big part of one of the reasons that FairyCon was such a big
Mm,
piece of my heart, because the people that I have as family there, we'd take over a hotel room,
mm,
and John and Mia would bring drinks for everybody, and Christopher Orapello and Tara Love McGuire would bring their shiny, lovely faces, and we'd all, just enjoy each other's company and share shared experiences and understand that we're not alone. And that was worth diamonds.
yeah.
So getting to spend that time with other authors who share my experience and tell me you're not alone. You're not. I think that's it. You're not alone.
Yeah. That's huge. I mean, because it's very lonely, especially online, people connecting with others online and only seeing each other at events or those few, it can feel very lonely, especially when you're surrounded by students or when you're surrounded by people who only are, taking your words and they're not really connecting with you, right?
Right.
It's yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And can I just
Especially,
say, I
yes.
sorry, go on.
I know. I was just
I
going to say that
oh,
when it's very interesting to see if people want to hang out with you or if they want to hang out with the author that they think they know.
yeah.
That's a big deal.
I haven't quite got there yet. Not yet, anyways, but I feel like I'm getting there. It's one of those things, and of course, being up here in middle of nowhere, Ontario, I don't see. I think I've seen like 10 people in my life regularly, and then everybody else is online, so I'm kind of
Yeah.
shielded from that. But but can I just say, I have to say this because I love it so much. I love that you and Chris Arapello are constantly bonding over your weapons. It's so cute. It is so cute.
It makes me so happy that I have more weapon friends. But it's funny because I was writing protection magic and I was shocked. Doing polls on Facebook and who does what and who does, and the number of people who said, "Oh, well, I don't need XYZ. I carry a knife." I'm like, "Oh, that's great.
Mm.
What martial art did you study?" "Oh, I've
Mhm.
never taken a martial art." "Okay, how did
Right.
you practice with your the knife that you carry?" "Oh, I don't." What do you think that that's going to do for you when you
Yeah.
need it? So I'm as soon as Chris was like, "Oh yeah, I did a thing." Amazing. Now we get to go to the
Well,
range and hang out.
and I hope you do. I really hope
Me
you do
too.
because he's. Oh, good, 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 good. Sorry, in my head canon, I like not knowing any of you in real life. I don't know who like hangs out with each other in real life,
Oh
so I
yeah.
have head canon about you all.
Yes, I
It's
love
so
it.
bad. It's so
Yeah,
bad.
Chris and Tara are like an hour from me. The range where
Wow,
we meet is, an hour or so. And so we'll go to the range, we'll shoot 50 rounds and go have lunch. And it's the best thing ever.
I love it. What is it about Delaware that you all seem to live in Delaware? It's either Delaware or Chicago. Like, what is that? Like,
It's
something weird going on.
It really is because it's the second smallest state. There's not even
Yeah.
1 million people in Delaware. It's
Hmm.
just one long beach. It's just
Yeah.
a,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it's a 2 hour long strip of beach. The widest part of Delaware is 12 miles across.
Yeah. Hmm.
It's just a little strip. So I think it's the fact that we're so close to everything, but they were far enough away that we can afford land and the taxes are good. The laws
Hmm.
are fantastic. Um, it's a blue state, so things like abortion care and are enshrined in our constitution, so
Hmm.
they can't just say, "Hey,
That's good.
nope,
That's really
that's."
important.
Yeah, it's very very
Hmm.
important. So I really just love that we have the access that we do. It's lovely, like the Assembly of the Sacred Wheel, who listened 2 weeks ago know that that's Evo, and some of Evo's people. Um, have a relationship with the United Church of Christ in town,
Mm.
and they get to use their church for
Wow.
ritual. Like those relationships you can't take for granted, first of all.
Mm.
But when you hear that witches get to practice ritual in a place called United Church of Christ,
Mhm.
you don't expect that, but it's really lovely.
Mm.
It's the second smallest state, and there's 3 or 4 cups chapters just in my county. Like the assembly has done so much groundwork for the rest of the state. Even if you're not a member, we sort of have that right of access because people have done the work. People have done the
Mm. Mhm.
our Pagan Pride Day has been around. I've been going to it for 20 years, and it was there before I moved to Delaware. And it, it's really incredible the amount of time that we've spent putting that legwork in. And it was, gosh, 18 years ago, probably. We were at Pagan Pride Day, and there was a gentleman in a Delaware State Police uniform handing out Bible tracts with a group that had
Wow.
come from the local church to harass us.
Wow.
Um, we always have a small area off to the side so parents can drop off their kids, and there's all ages activities, and there's
Mm.
story times, and there's stuff to keep the kids busy so parents can go
Mhm.
and and visit the different classes and offerings, they don't miss out. And someone had attempted to gain access to the children. Your mommy and daddy are going to hell. Like telling a 5-year-old your parents are
Wow.
going to hell, it's just awful.
Wow.
So opening the dialogue with Delaware State Police, like we know that this is against regulation. How are
Mhm,
you going to enforce it? How are you going to make sure
mhm,
that this doesn't happen again? You know,
mm,
we're a religious community just like everybody else, and they need to respect that.
mhm.
So there's
It's
so
still
much work that's
shocking.
gone into it.
It's still shocking to me. I recently, like weirdly, I've not talked to him before, but Kirk Cullen
Yes,
reached out and added me on Facebook, and I was like, oh, I remember you from Witchbox, blah blah, right? And I remember how much work he did like 20, 25, 30 years ago in Canada and
yes.
in the States as well. And it's surprising to me that constant thing. And we have so many mutual friends in places like Oklahoma, for example. I remember you were on Jay Clark's podcast a couple of years ago, and just listening to their stories about what Oklahoma or down south is like, and it's like, I feel like we get so used to our own local areas that we don't see the things that happen in other places.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
because the space between New York and DC is so
Hmm.
densely packed.
Hmm.
I can drive in 2 hours. I can be in New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Washington, D.C. I can
Hmm.
get to all of those places.
Hmm.
But if you say that to somebody in Texas, they'll laugh at you
Right.
because I could drive 2 hours to the grocery store.
Yeah.
So it's very spread out. So you get those metropolitan areas and you sort of take it for granted that because there are so many really densely populated areas that you're going to find people who agree with you, who want to interact with you, who want to
Mm.
do things with you. Um, that it's so much harder when people are that much more spread out.
Yeah. To come together to organize. Absolutely, absolutely. It's funny, like looking, being from the UK myself, having like I'm planning on moving back over there and connecting in. There's such a difference between the pagan community in Wales, which is much spread out, very small population in quite a large space, relatively large space. It's like 5 million people in Wales, and then like 50 million in England, and like Wales can just fit in like half of England, right? So it's a
Mhm.
huge, massive space. So it's interesting to see the differences in community there. Very similar to Texas, to the space that you live in. But it's interesting because I feel like in the spaces that are farther out, people know each other better because they have to intentionally travel to meet, and there's only so many meeting places. Would you say that's true of the US for in your
Absolutely.
experience? Yeah.
Not just the US as a macrocosm, but the
Mm,
pagan community as a microcosm.
yeah.
Um, Baltimore, for example, we jokingly call it Smaltimore because everybody knows everybody else's business, even though there's a bajillion people. When you take the pagan community as a piece of that, reflective
Mm,
of the larger whole, the Baltimore pagan community, yeah, everybody knows everybody else's business. Delaware
mm,
is the same way. That because there's not a million people in the whole state, when you shrink that down to just the pagan community of our state,
right. Right.
everybody knows everybody else. So if you have someone who pops up one day and says, I'm going to teach moon phases, and no one's ever heard of you, you have no mutual friends, that's suspect because,
Yeah.
we've been around for a million years and we always expect that we'll know everybody.
Hmm.
And that just says, okay, who are your people? Where have you been? Where did you learn this from? That we have no one in common. Like
Hmm. Hmm.
not even authors who accept everyone's friend
Everybody.
request,
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
because they're out there.
Hmm.
So it's always going to be an interesting judge of who you are as a practitioner based on who your Facebook friends are.
It's fascinating. Oh, as like an anthropologist kind of minded person, I'm always very curious around that, and especially with like community building, because it's like layer upon layer, but it's very interesting. Well, where do people come from in that, or where do people fit through the cracks like that? Or you'll have people in like places like oh, where's like San Francisco, right?
Mhm.
And they say, I don't know anybody here. There's no pagan community here. And you're like, in San Francisco, really? Or like they'll say the gay community, and it's like, in San Francisco, really? Like, right?
Sure.
Yeah. But I feel like that's going down a dark and terrible path. So let's not go down there. We're unfortunately coming up to time, but I'm curious about your other work. You've already talked about one of them. What's the other work that you've recently submitted? What can you tell us?
So the next book is should be out in the spring. It's not for pre-order yet, but any minute, I promise.
Ooh,
Will be Social Media Magic, and that's
social media.
from Sterling Ethos, who is owned by Barnes and Noble. So you'll be able to find those not only at your local Barnes and Noble, but Sterling Ethos does sell as an outside house, so your
Mhm.
independent pagan shops will be able to order from Sterling Ethos and find them there. It's called Social Media Magic: 366 Ways to Get Witchy on the Web. It's not platform specific, so
Mhm.
Twitter melting down did not affect our book at all.
Right.
Um, things like the concern over whether or not Facebook will be here a year or 5 years, 10 years from now. Those things are not an issue because we're looking at platforms as a whole instead of individual platforms that come and go. Obviously, with the meltdown of Twitter and theories about Facebook and privacy, there have been a lot of social media, different platforms pop up. The
Mm.
gorgeous and lovely Matt Aron will text me at 2 a.m. saying, "Oh, there! If you want a thing, here's my next thing. Oh, you're amazing. I love you. I would buy you a puppy." Uh, uh,
He is
so it's
amazing. He is like very cute.
oh
Anyways.
yes, somebody I would do anything for. Because I've been in security so long, I'm very private about my private information. It's very
Hmm.
very selective. Um,
Absolutely.
and so the fact that Matt and I can text at 2 a.m. and just be like, "Hey, I miss your face." Um, but yeah, so social media magic. It is a page a day calendar, so to speak, and including this year is a leap year, so we have February 29th. Um,
Oh,
but
you're
it's
right.
really
Yeah, I've forgotten about that.
yeah, I'm super excited. Um, so it's really lovely to get to understand not only who you are as a magical person through the lens of what you post on social media, but it's things like privacy concerns for your social media profiles, how to make sure that you can be as safe as you can. My security background comes out and everything.
Mm.
But it's really lovely. So you'll have a candle magic spell for renewal in the new year. I
Mm.
might post up my tripod and do a time lapse video of me cleaning off my altar for that renewal of the new year. And it's 360 ideas for
Love that.
posting,
Love that.
for keeping your magic safe and secure, but also really allowing yourself to uh, harvest some free floating energy for that magical practice and really finding yourself within it.
Love that. I
I'm really
love that.
happy with the way that came together. And it's got a super cute cover, and I'm very excited about it. So the moment it's up for pre-order, that'll be on, I'll talk about that on amyblackthorn.com.
Perfect.
Anytime there's
Perfect.
a preview, right now you can download the first 30 pages of all my books on amyblackthorn.com because I want you to know that
Mhm.
you want my voice in your head. Uh,
That's a huge big. I love that they offer previews like that now,
yeah,
especially for those people who. I mean, let's be honest, books are becoming more expensive, and that's why the rise of digital books is a big thing right now.
yeah.
So with the social media book that you're putting out, then can I ask you about your opinion of AI? Because I feel like that's becoming something that a lot of people are curious about, people are connecting with, people have concerns about because of egregores and servitors and tying into something that's so synthetic. I'm curious about what your opinion is on all.
Thank you, because this was a big deal when we were writing this. Um, Natalie, who's my co-author, we had a lot of conversations around the not just the presentation of AI, but should we write a spell that works from an AI platform? Can I ask
Mm-hmm.
ChatGPT to write me a spell? No, you really can't.
Yeah.
That is that's stealing from other authors, it's stealing from other witches. It has no parameters to understand what magic is. So the information that I explained to her in the way that I talked about it was I pulled up an image from I think it was Twitter where someone asked AI to create a picture that shows the ingredients for making a cake
Right.
for whatever article they were working on. And it's like six different presentations of eggs that are all spelled differently. It's like counting the fingers in a portrait and you look and there's 12 fingers or there's 12 different eggs here. Only one of them is really necessary for making a cake.
Mhm.
Um, the computer in that because it's made by non-magical people,
Mm,
and because it's there, we know that there's really no such thing as AI right now.
mm,
There's This is all programming knowledge. You can't program it to understand what magic is. So the understanding that it could tell you how to create a feasible spell doesn't work
mhm.
because it has no context. Context is everything. So people say, "Oh, well, the cat's out of the bag. It's not going anywhere. It's here to stay." But again, it doesn't understand what we're talking about. You can
Mhm.
ask it to regurgitate some information that it's gleaned from Hamlet.
Absolutely.
That's stealing from the authors who wrote it and were
Yeah.
illegally, in a lot of cases,
Mhm.
had their work sampled to talk about Hamlet.
Mm,
But there's no way for that computer to understand, why we would choose a blue candle over a green candle on any given
mm,
day.
mhm.
So while it seems like a neat randomizer for our magical practice, um, I know that my high priest is a chaos magician from a million years ago. Um, there's no way for it to understand that context and to give it
Mm,
back to someone who's researching and who's looking for that connection for their magical practice. So even,
mm,
things like, oh, I can pick a one number between 1 and 10, but it
mm,
can't
mm.
say, I want a bee spell with honey and come up with any real context as to why those things are important. So I'm working with my agent and our agency. I've volunteered for a couple of writers unions that I've been part of to
Mhm.
help with their conversation on AI. Um, the fact that someone can write a book in the style of Hemingway, you're even if you're programming the material from day one, you're still ripping off that artist that you're
Totally.
hopefully, you're thinking you're inspiring others to emulate. And that's not how that works. That's not how creativity works, and that's not how we get new ideas. That's how you regurgitate old ideas.
I really feel that one. I see a lot of interest in the folkloric witchcraft community.
Mhm.
And having just gone through, studying folklore myself, that piece around that living element, that animistic element of story being told and birthed into somebody else by that what's the word? As I try to speak about it, of course, the words all go on me. Through that oral transmission, right?
Right.
Is huge. I see a lot of people asking for like tarot readings, for prayers, for all of these things, and it's that question for me always of in transmitting something that was never alive in to begin with, that you never received through that oral transmission, how much power is actually in there? What are you actually putting out there into the universe, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I
When we
like
look,
where are people's heads,
yeah, in telling a story, you're affecting the storyteller as much as the story listener.
Yeah,
And the egregore is born out of that correlation between storyteller and listener. That
completely.
if you're not getting that hair standing up on your arms, like there's something wrong. And there's
Mhm.
nothing included in that when you're talking about AI. Especially, I had a friend who recently, he said, "Oh, my tea shop just got a company wants to do a feature article on us, and I'm super happy. I'm super excited." And they sent it back, and they're. I'm reading through the copy, and you can just feel the hairs on the back of your neck stand up because the word choices are so wrong that you can tell that it's AI generated, and
Uh,
someone just popped the name of their tea shop in as a money making scam. And it's like
right.
that's super crappy. And also, I'm sorry that happened to you because there's no human voice in it. You can
So human
tell
voice.
there's no magic in it. There's no animus in it. So there can't be magic to be extracted from it because there's nothing put into it.
Because there's nothing in there, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, it concerns me. It really does concern me. I mean, obviously, the overtly AI generated or ghost written books that you find on Amazon from a single author who has 350 books, right? Like
Right.
impossible that this person can exist.
Right.
What I'm concerned about is those people who are maybe self-publishing stuff that they've generated through AI. They may have one or two or three. And I mean, look at the whole TikTok witch grimoire bullshit thing, right? How
Yeah.
much of that not only was stealing from other authors, but it was the audacity of it. I know what I'm talking about. And then you actually look at what they put out and it's all AI generated or it's
Yeah.
ripped off from other people. And it's like, you know,
You have to explain to them that that's not knowing what you're talking about.
no,
Discovering witchcraft
yeah,
6 weeks ago, and now you have a 365 classes on no pumpkin. Like you can read two books,
no,
but that doesn't mean you understood them, and it doesn't mean you understand the context that we're talking about.
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that's a whole other conversation in itself. And I mean, I feel like my own bitterness might come out there. So I'm not going to put that out considering the topic we've talked about today. But that sounds amazing. When is the book coming out? When can
So it'll be
people
out in the
start to pre-order
spring,
it?
and late spring, I'm sure.
Late spring.
I just turned in the red pen edit on New Year's Day, so it still has the PDF is done. It looks like a book. It's always my favorite
Yes.
edit because you can see what the pages look like when you're going through. It's so neat. I've seen the cover. I've seen some of the inside bits.
Mhm.
We're in the home stretch now, so
Oh, that's so exciting. That's so exciting. Is it still as exciting for you every time you get a new one, like kind of coming back your way? And which part is the most exciting bit for you?
absolutely every single one of them is different.
Every single one of them?
Um,
Yeah.
the neat thing, my favorite part is always when I'm so deep into a book that it'll wake me up out of a sound sleep and I have to go write 1,000 words on whatever I just dreamt. And I'm like, okay, then everything pops in. Like when I was writing Botanical Magic, I was writing about jasmine and I had a dream about justice magic. And the epiphany in this dream was that the date, time, and place of a filing of a legal document was the date, time, and place of birth for
Mm,
either empowering or disempowering those legal documents. So you can use it for empowering a bill that's coming out of committee. You want to make sure that this becomes a law. I can give it a little bit more oomph. Or if you're wanting to be granted a protection order from a spouse or a partner, you
mhm,
can empower it that way. If you want to make sure that your material goes away, want to disempower a lawsuit, especially those frivolous lawsuits that seem to pop
mm.
up, you can disempower it that way. So I had to jump up at 3 in the morning
Had to.
and go write it in the book. So those when it wakes me up, I know that there's some legs to it.
Mhm.
I love the red pen in it because I can see what the pages look like and it really feels like a book. And then the day that the author copies arrive, because it's a real book. Tara Love McGuire will tease me until the day I die, and I love it. When I got my author copies of Botanical Magic, I had my old. This is
Oh.
the
Mhm.
the first draft. It doesn't even have a back
Yeah,
to it.
yeah.
This is just what they send people. So when I opened the book of author copies, I'm digging through, I'm pulling the paper out, I'm live on camera, and I turned it over and I squealed, "It's a book, it has a back." Like getting to the back cover is always the last thing we get to see because it's the
Yeah.
last thing that gets finalized. So I never get to see the back of the book until it actually comes to my
Actually is
door,
there. Absolutely. Yeah.
and I make ridiculous noises and it's great.
It's okay. I did too. It's funny. I like. I mean, only on my first one, right? I'm sure it'll be different for the second or third one or 10th one, however many I can get out there. But it was weird the emotions going through because like I got my, the PDF copy from Llewellyn. That was
Mhm.
wonderful. I loved it, all of that. And then I got my author copy, and then I think I carried that thing around with me for like 2 weeks. It was always in my bag. It was always close to me. I'm like, oh, like, oh, exciting. And then when my other when my author proofs came, the two copies that you get, at least with Llewellyn, I was like, oh yeah, this is exciting. The back cover, yeah, this is exciting. And then the box of books came, same thing, like a week later, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is exciting. What for me was walking
Yeah.
into the bookstore that I had worked at because I during the pandemic I worked at a bookstore in Waterloo up here in Ontario. and that's where I did my author event. And walking in and seeing the stacks that were waiting for me to sign, that's when I knew, oh, I'm an author now. It was nice. It was nice.
But
Yeah.
I'm bad at this. I keep pushing the goalposts farther and further back, like, oh, I feel like an author when this, and then I just keep moving those goalposts. Um, when I realized that big retailers like Target and Walmart were selling my books, it just blew my mind because I lived through the 90s when there was it was a big hullabaloo that
Hmm.
Godsmack had a pentacle inside the cover of their album and
Oh,
Walmart was
right.
selling them. They pulled them from the shelves and there was
Right.
clutching of pearls and it was awful. Um, and so I remember how alienated, people who wanted to listen to Godsmack felt, witches who enjoyed paganism felt, and to see Walmart of all companies who has displays of Jesus Christ Superstar in their
Right.
in the aisles selling books on witchcraft, I felt like not only are we in a new era, but I get to be a part of it.
And you get to be a part of it. Well, the reality now is that you're not going to be a real author until it arrives at Dollar General, right?
Yes.
I said that to Vincent Higginbotham a few months ago after we were talking about his book, Footy Witchery. And I was like, well, you talk so much about dollar stores in here. It's not real until it's actually being sold in that same dollar store. It's like, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
It'd be amazing.
It's so good. It's so good. Amy, this has been delightful. I have kept you way longer than I intended to, but this was good. I really appreciated this. Like Mortellus, I'm going to have you back on at some point, I hope, if you'll come back. If I
I would
haven't
absolutely
bored you
come
to
back.
death. Oh, good, good,
No,
good, good, good.
I had a fabulous time, and I'm thrilled to have gotten to spend time in your company.
Oh, and me too. You were on my list of people anyways, mainly because like I remember like Jay Clark, for example, I'm really good friends with Jay. I don't get to talk to him as much as I can, but he's just delightful. I remember like his podcast was the first time I'd really heard about you because I'm not a horticultural person. I'm not. I try, but I'm not, right? So listening to that interview, I was like, fuck is this? And then I listened to it and it was great. But
Yay!
you've been on my list to connect with and it's been such fun. So I'm really pleased. So how can people find out more about you? I know your website's just down below. What else are you offering? What do you have coming up? Any events or anything like that?
Yes, I'm super excited. My next events will be I'm going to Wicked Mojo in Conyers, Georgia for a weekend. I'm going to Beck Lawrence, who is the Serpent's Key shop in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, who's suing their state for
Oh,
the right
yes,
to
yes,
read
yes.
tarot.
Hmm.
So I'll be doing a class there on protection magic, the self-defense, magical and
Mm.
practical. And then my next big event will be Sacred Space in Baltimore in the
Which is coming
early
up very
spring.
soon.
Yes,
Hmm.
fast speed of light. So I'm thrilled because I'm debuting of course a whole host of new classes. I think I'm
Wonderful.
doing 4 new classes for
Oh,
Sacred Space.
fantastic. That's
It's
fantastic.
it's gonna be a lot.
And
I can
that
just
event is on my list. Like it looks amazing.
It really is. It's nice because there are no beginner level classes. It's all advanced practitioners really digging in deep and not just getting to experience the classes, but experiencing each other. There's lots of lovely mixers and time to, again, get to relate to people that you only get to see at festivals on a more personal level.
I mean, a lot of the American or of the US based events are things I would not naturally go to anyways because of the
Mhm.
distance, the border, all of that, right?
Right, right.
But I happen to connect with quite a few people around the same time as last year's event, where Between the Worlds was also happening, and people, especially like little 19-year-old who, first time being at an event like that, meeting all these people like gobsmacked, right? So living vicariously through him, seeing all of these things, it was quite neat.
As as someone who's a part of the LGBTQIA plus community, it's really incredible to see the strength of community that Evo and his group have built as gay men, as
Mhm.
people in my community. I had never experienced that as a very young practitioner,
Mhm.
and it's life changing. It really gets you right in your heart. So getting to see the success of Between the Worlds every few years when it comes around. It's really incredible.
And it only comes around every, what's it, 4 years, 3 years?
Depends on the astrological alignment that they're
That
going
makes
for, but
sense.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
yeah, 4 years is a good
Hmm.
rule, and
Yeah.
it's really incredible some of the magical gettings up to. This last year was really lovely, getting two conferences for the price of one, and really getting to see all that talent under one roof at one time is great.
And I
Um,
think this year, someone was, Eva or Irene or somebody was saying that you're now in a different location. It's going to be in a different hotel, right?
yes, yes, we're
Yeah.
moving around the corner, so to speak. So it was in Hunt Valley, Maryland,
Hmm.
which is where McCormick Spices is. You know, you look on the back of your spice bottle, a lot of times McCormick is right
Mm.
there. It's in Hunt Valley, Maryland. I grew up just up the street, so you could always tell what they were uh,
Yeah.
producing that day from the smell of the entire state. Uh, and so now we're around the corner in Towson, Maryland.
Mm.
So it's a really lovely hotel, and it's got some great amenities. And hopefully, my biggest problem with the hotel that has since closed was the handicap access.
Mm.
As a
Mhm.
as a handicapped person, making
Mhm.
sure that access was really important to me, and they could not have cared less about
Yeah.
the handicap access for the hotel. They had two elevators, only one of which was functioning. They had one set of escalators going down to the basement and up, and only the up was working, the down was not. The down was stairs. So having to have that conversation with them about accessing for handicapped persons is really important. The While we were there for last Sacred Space, like the fire alarm went off at 5 a.m.
Mhm.
I had to
Yeah.
teach at 9 a.m. So
Right.
I was really looking forward to that extra hour of sleep.
Yeah.
So yes, that hotel has since closed permanently, and it's going to,
Mm.
I'm sure, be sold and renovated or something. But we're in a really lovely new hotel, and I'm so excited about it.
It's beautiful. So I'll make sure that that is also in the show notes for people. This is coming out late March, and I
Perfect.
think is that around this time. I can't remember when it
Yeah,
was
yeah,
supposed. It's,
it should be
yeah.
early
So
April, so it'd be perfect timing.
perfect. So if people are in the area, and I think most people who are listening to this already know about the event, they're either too far away to attend or they're going to make the trek because it's amazing. But for those of you who might have just come across this, that will be happening in Maryland, and so all you need to do put Secret Space Conference 2024. Find it in the show notes. Meanwhile, go and give Amy a like on their social medias. It's always a good thing. If you've enjoyed Amy's books before, do go and leave a review because that's always a good thing to do for authors as well. And in the meantime, I've been Ben Stimson. This has been Amy Blackthorn. Thank you so much, Amy.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Everybody, have a good rest of your weekday, afternoon, life, whatever you want to call it. See you all around.